Hello there, I am reasonably British and this is
The Hermes 3000.
Yeah!
This is a manual typewriter from the year 1968, and this is supposedly the finest impact notation apparatus ever made. I mean, don't take my word for it, just listen to noted film actor Woody Harrelson.
No typewriter has ever been made that is better than a Hermes.
Well then, I just have one question for you.
Is that my daughter in there?
And if you'd allow a brief follow-up question, is this typewriter really that above and beyond the rest that it's worth the prices they're going for? Or is this all just tailor mania? And in 6 months the prices will all fall off the swift cliff? Well, I've owned this Hermes, which I have so named Murray Slaughter, for an unspecified amount of time now, but long enough to form an opinion, which I shall tell you at the end of this video, and also right now. Yeah, it's really, really good. It's not my favorite, but it's easily top 5. Allow me to hit on some of the more important takeaways in case you don't want to stay for the whole video. The typing is full of buttery goodness. It feels excellent to type on, although at this level I think it is very much a matter of personal taste. I don't feel it's good enough to deserve the hype surrounding it, but it is indeed buttery smooth. I hear the platen knobs are usually an issue, which fortunately Murray Slaughter's previous owner has already addressed with these aftermarket doodads. I've found that most amateur-level repairs and adjustments are, well, let me just show you. The top thingy-mabob comes off like mia. To remove the carriage, you park the drawstring from mia to mia, loosen 2 screws, then a bit of fiddle. The bottom case comes off with 4 screws and a little fiddle. This screw bit right mia controls the uppercase vertical alignment, and these 2 screws are the lowercase. To remove the guts completely, first remove the carriage, then the bottom, then a bit of fiddle. And Bob's your uncle. Now to remove the platen. To remove the platen, you don't ever remove the platen, don't do it. Sure, it may be quick and relatively painless for you if you're lucky, but there's a 17% chance that whilst the platen is out, this mechanical abomination falls out of position, and then there's nothing left to do except
Love you!
I must say most of the repairs and adjustments on this seem simple enough, but be warned, this way lies madness. Like most things to come out of Switzerland, they are feature-rich yet fatally flawed. So it is a really excellent typewriter, overpriced, over-engineered. But if this tickles your particular fancy, it may in fact be the best typewriter ever. To you, not me. And not to Woody Harrelson either.
I would probably say that this, with a good case, would be the one typewriter I would take, and that's why it's kind of out right now.
Well, I must say, Woody Harrelson, if that is your real name, I 100% agree with you. This is my Smith Corona Silent Super, and not only do I like the typing feel a bit better, they've made most of the common adjustments easily accessible and simple to perform. For example, to remove the platen, you just pull this thingy, give this a good swish and flick, then you push this little knobberoo and then, oh, it's so much simpler. And to change the height of the upper and lower case letters, it's these 2 slotted screws after you loosen the corresponding nuts. And the margin system is so much simpler. Sure, it's behind the paper, but who cares? I think that was all the important stuff. It is time for progressive elaboration. Back to the Hermes. Is that how you pronounce it, Hermes?
The typewriter company Hermes is pronounced Hermes, with the emphasis on the first syllable. It's a bit different from the fashion brand Hermes, which is pronounced.
Okay then, I shall elaborate on the Hermes. I purchased this typewriter from a tiny little blue man whom I met about an hour after dropping. At the time of purchase, the blue man said he thought the typing felt a bit squishy, with which I totally agreed. The blue man took my money, then lassoed a passing hawk and started dropping water balloons on the pedestrians below as the hawk flew him to wherever little blue men go during the night. After a brief gander at the innards of the typewriter, I suspected the squishiness, maybe at least in part from the dirt, the old grime, the dust, the exposure to disco. It was time for a cleanse. So, I took all the body panels off and flushed it all out with mineral spirits. Then I did the same thing with rubbing alcohol and then dried it off with my
industrial strength hair dry.
Do please keep in mind that
I don't know what I am doing.
so proceed at your own risk. But it did seem to work. The squishiness has receded from whence it came. It's now been several weeks since the cleanse with no adverse effects from the lack of lubrication, although I may check the Holy Scriptures to see if they recommend a little lube on the escapement or something. Once I realized I was going to make a video about this, I figured I should actually experience taking out the platen. It looked easy enough from the YouTube videos I saw. The platen came out moderately easy, and then I started to put it back in. That's the last thing I remember. I woke up 12 days later in Baker, California with no undergarments, holding some type of medieval stabbing weapon, and saw several little blue people disappearing into the distance. After the long walk back to London, I made another attempt and was finally able to get the platen back in correctly. At least, I think. I shall now demonstrate the replatinizing. First, this is how it is supposed to work, and I've put this little cylinder back in so it will move properly. When you move the carriage return arm to the right thusly, it should push this thing, which in turn moves the ratchet claw thingy on the bottom. The carriage return lever should spring back to the left when released. If the carriage return lever doesn't spring back to the left, this spring may be unhooked, or more likely the whole assembly has fallen out of position and this bit is in front of this bit. To put the line spacing assembly back in the correct position for replatinization, I've found that it's best to put that cylinder thing back in first, then set the line spacing to 1, whilst making sure that this roller arm thingy is behind this little tabomajig. Then you should confirm that the ratchet claw thing wants to spring upward and that the carriage return arm wants to spring leftwise, especially after pushing the arm all the way right. After said confirmation, replatinization may commence. The platen has to go in at an angle, so pull this cylinder out just a bit. Once the platen seems in place, slide these 2 flat springs into place on the cylinder thing. Twist the cylinder and push until it goes deeper into the platen. You may now stick the right handle and platen axle through the platen, being cautious not to poke the cylinder thing out the other side. Meanwhile, at the left side, stick the axle through the cylinder with both this notch and this screw hole facing up. Pull the cylinder out just enough so that the screw hole is towards the far end of that notch. Now, put the left handle back on and screw. Then you may tighten those 2 screws on the right side. Good, now test everything. This is not the way the manual tells you to do it, but I've done this half a dozen times now and it seems to be the best way for me. Your acreage may vary, but hopefully this saves some of you from the barren hellscape that is Baker, California. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk a bit more about the margin and carriage system, which I thought took some getting used to. Once you use it a few times, it becomes second nature, but in the beginning, I confess I was slightly frustrated. This lever centers, locks, and releases the carriage. This lever and its mirror are for setting and releasing the margin, 1 for each side. And this button allows you to manually move the carriage. Again, 1 for each side. It's a bit overcomplicated and sometimes you have to simultaneously push a button, pull a lever and push the carriage, which I think only Germany could engineer this any further beyond. In spite of the misery and frustration this has imposed upon me, I am still very glad to own one, if not only for the perspective but for the buttery typing experience, which again, not my favorite. I think the smoothest typing of all my typewriters is this. Made by brother in Japan, it is shockingly easy to type on. However, the Smith Corona 5 series is my personal favorite. Speaking of perspective, I'd like to give you a better feel for mine. So when I say buttery, you may have a better idea of what I'm comparing it to. First of all, I've never used a Royal, a Remington, an Underwood, or any electric typewriter. My collection consists of 2 more in the 5 series, a Smith Corona Galaxy 12, a Skywriter, an Olympia SM 3 or 4, another one that types in cursive, a Splendid 66, a Groma Colibri, and a Facet 1620. I've found that the Smiths all have a similar and distinct feel to them, as do all the Olympias. This is the only Hermes I've ever touched, so take that for what it is.
Jackie. She's having the baby.
I'll put on some corn.